Thank you. There's no minutes this evening. I've got nothing to report.
No.
Disclosure of interests?
None, Chair.
Urgent business? Sorry.
No urgent business, no.
Yeah, I thought I had somebody say something. References from committees and other bodies?
No references, Chair.
Now, what I propose tonight is to take the plan and white paper first. So, Sue Frost, if you, I believe you, is it, who's doing this? Is it Sarah Barker?
Hello, Chair.
Sorry, Sarah.
Yes, no, it's Sue Frost, actually. Hello there.
I thought it was, but I could see Sarah Barker on the report.
Yes, she wrote the report. I'm presenting it tonight, Chair. Thank you.
If you'd like to go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, just bear with me. Okay. Good evening, members, everyone. Director for Planning and Transport, and I've got Sunil Sahadavan here with me as well, who's the Head of Development Management. And what we were going to do tonight was just give you an overview of the report, and then we will share questions between us. Sunil's got a lot more of the background with regard to development management, and we'll be able to answer your questions in relation to anything around that. So just let me start by saying that this report was being written for the council from a professional planning officer's point of view, and it is really our opinion on how the proposals will impact the current system. Of course, individuals are also able to send separate responses, and I think indeed the government are encouraging members of the public to do that, because some of the questions that you'll know that appear in the paper, and although we've got 3 parts to the report, our draft response to the questions doesn't go into detail as much for that reason. So we've got a covering report, we've got a draft executive report and response, and the final question, the draft response as well to the questions. The deadline for the response is the 29th of October, so we've got a bit of time, and the report is going to executive on the 12th of October before it's finalised. So I'll just start by saying that this white paper is very light on detail, and it is difficult really for us to comment on many of the proposals because the information just isn't there. So in many respects what we've done is provided, but I think really what we want to say is that some of the basics of the planning system haven't changed. So you've still got local plans, you've still got the MPPF and policy guidance, and you've also got the infrastructure levy and DM policies. However, and you'll have seen there's been a lot of conversations, there's been a lot of meetings going on, particularly with barristers and others giving webinars, and some of those links were put into the report deliberately for you to be able to have a look at what other people were saying about the paper, because there are some fundamental reforms that are being proposed within the paper, and I think it's important from the council and that it goes to executive. So I shall just briefly outline the main areas, I think, rather than go into detail about everything that's in the report. And I think just to start with, it's important to say that local plans are obviously going to be affected quite significantly. So the process around local plan preparation is going to change probably more than any other part of the planning regime as we know it, because the government are suggesting now that we have zoned areas for growth, for renewal and for protection. One of our concerns is around the lack of detail around how this will work in practice, and actually how we will be able different areas, because it's very, very different from the way we work at the moment, where we're obviously allocating specific sites for certain types of development. It will mean that areas become much more generic, and that basically we will be faced with permission in principle in some areas, which I will come on to shortly as well. The other area that I think is particularly important for us and we raise concerns about is the duty to cooperate, and how any unmet needs for housing and infrastructure will be accommodated in the future without the duty to cooperate, because you'll be aware at the moment that Central Bedfordshire are proposing significant numbers of homes to meet Luton's need, as are North Herts. Both of those plans are going through the process at the moment. The other area, again, which will affect us and give more resources, is the statutory duty to complete a plan within 30 months if this system comes into play. So 30 months is really a very short timescale in terms of the old style plan preparation. If the new system is streamlined to such an extent, it may not be quite so much of a challenge, but actually we still think it will have significant resource implications when you add to that the fact that we've got to get to grips with a completely new system of planning. Again, of relevance to Luton and will be of importance to members is the fact that there will be a national top-down number imposed for local authorities across the country for housing. So at the moment we would normally have consultants working out, because it's quite a complicated methodology, what the housing need, and we then evidence that in what's called a housing market, strategic housing market assessment. If we get a top-down number which is given to us, it's really unclear as to how that will be calculated and what the impacts for somewhere like Luton would be, where we are tightly constrained and we may not be able to meet, we wouldn't be able to meet all the needs for housing within the borough boundary. Some of the more positive aspects of the paper are things like digital planning. And we think this could have a more positive impact, because it could give a wider percentage of the population more access to plans and the planning process. I mean, we've seen through Zoom meetings and Skype that actually it gives more people the ability to join into meetings and to have discussions around particular areas. So it could be a positive thing. I'll just move on to other areas of reform within the white paper. One of the other areas which we don't have in Luton at the moment is the infrastructure levy. And what the government are suggesting is that we have a new flat rate infrastructure levy, which will be calculated by the government and will be a flat rate. Now, again, this is very light on detail, and we don't really know how they're going to do this and whether it would be set at the right level for Luton. It could be a positive if it reduces the need for viability assessments. At the moment, we know that many of the proposals that we have come forward don't always deliver level of Section 106 agreement. And I think, if we can get higher levels of infrastructure levy, then that could be a very positive thing for the town. On development management, and Sonny will maybe want to talk about this a bit more, so in terms of planning permissions and planning applications, the paper is suggesting that we have national development management policies rather than developing local policies which would apply in Luton. Now, to some extent, we welcome this because there'll be more emphasis, and there is more emphasis on design in the white paper. They're also suggesting that there'll be a statutory requirement for a chief officer for design, and that could be positive as well, provided it's adequately resourced by the government. However, the downside to this, in that if we don't have the resource, then it's going to be more and more difficult for us to produce detailed design codes and policies at the local level. That could be really quite resource intensive. The proposals also suggest that we won't have as much public involvement at the planning application stage, but there'll be more front loading through the local plan process when sites are designated as either growth areas, renewal areas or protected areas. And in growth areas, permission in principle will be given, which basically means that permission will be in outline, in effect, within the growth areas that have been designated, which is different to the way it's dealt with at the moment, obviously, in that somebody could apply for outline permission and then follow up with reserved matters. And I think the government are suggesting that this be a much more streamlined process, but I know that there are a number of concerns around that. I think it's important to mention, though, that full permission is still required in protected areas. And then finally, and I'll finish off, there is, as I said, an awful lot of detail that is missing. And so it's very difficult to speculate to some extent on what some of these proposals could mean for us without further detail. But some of the areas that aren't mentioned, such as green belt, environmental impact assessment, and climate change and the economy, are really key areas for Luton. And I think, that it's disappointing that they are not included to any great extent within the white paper. So I'll finish there, and then we'll take questions if people have them.
Any questions at this point? No, Sue. Oh, sorry. Right, there's a comment. Councillor Frank, you wish to make a comment?
Yeah, thanks very much. And I do actually think that Sue has, to some extent, understated the far-reaching effects that these reforms would have if they were introduced as proposed. And I know there is a lot of detail missing, that's perfectly true. But nevertheless, the implications for Luton are potentially very grave indeed. We already have a serious problem attracting good quality investment into the town, partly because of the relatively low land and rental values that we have. The thrust of all of this, all through
Sorry to interrupt, but I'm getting a telephone message from someone. Somebody has made a telephone call and not got their mic turned off, and I'm being distracted. Sorry.
You wouldn't notice, would you?
Okay. Well, it seems, has it stopped?
Yes, it has stopped, David.
Okay. The whole thrust of the documents, the white paper and the letter from the Chief Planning Officer, that remove the ability of local authorities to deal with development control in the way that they've been used to, and to and to give developers pretty much a free hand. The other most noticeable thing going all the way through it all is that where they are leaving control of some kind, that control is largely in the hands of the minister and not in the local planning authority. this is a really, really worrying development. I'm not at all comfortable with the draft responses that are before us. I've produced a list, I'm sorry, but it's 14 items long, a list of suggested changes to Overview and Scrutiny Board will agree to send to the Executive as a reference from this committee. I circulated these suggestions to all of the members on Overview and Scrutiny Board this morning. I would have liked to have done so yesterday, but I didn't actually get a chance to read the documents until late last night and early this morning. So I don't know how many people have been able to read through them. I sent them to the key officers involved later during the day, so they are available on people's emails. I want to formally move that they be sent, that the draft and the changes be sent to the Executive as a reference from this committee. And I don't know quite how you want me to deal with this now, because I don't know how many people have been able to read it. But if you want me to, I'm quite happy to go through line by line explaining what I'm trying to achieve.
Please don't.
I await your instructions, Chair.
Can we take the comments from Councillor Taylor and Councillor Abbas Hussain first, David, and then come back to you? And I think then if we see what their comments are and then go through the proposed, what you've actually sent out to everybody. Can we do that, please?
Yeah, thanks, Anna. I agree with David Franks on this one. We've seen the results of the previous